When I first met Daniel, I thought I had finally found the person I was meant to be with. He was different from the guys I had dated before, gentle, respectful, and completely attentive. There was a calmness in the way he spoke, a thoughtfulness in the way he listened. He wasn't the type to rush into anything. Instead, he always made me feel safe, like I could trust him with every piece of my heart. We met at a friend's birthday party. It wasn't one of those wild nights full of chaos and alcohol. It was more of a cozy gathering, just a few close friends. I had gone there without any expectations, just to unwind after a long week. But then I noticed him across the room. Daniel wasn't trying to be the center of attention. He was sitting quietly, listening to someone talk, his hands wrapped around a glass of water instead of beer. His smile was soft, almost shy, but the kind that makes you want to smile back without even realizing. Our first conversation started with something simple, a comment about the music playing in the background. He mentioned that he loved older songs, the kind most people our age didn't even listen to. I laughed, admitting that I had a playlist full of the same kind. That small connection turned into a longer conversation, and before I knew it, the rest of the night had passed with the two of us sitting in the corner, completely lost in our own little world. There was something magnetic about him. Not the kind of attraction that's flashy or loud, but the kind that makes you want to keep peeling back the layers, to know more, to understand the quiet strength behind those eyes. When the night ended, he walked me to my car. No cheesy lines, no pressure. Just a simple, "It was really nice talking to you. I'd like to see you again." And just like that, we started seeing each other. The early days of dating Daniel felt like something out of a dream. He wasn't clingy, but he also wasn't distant. He struck this perfect balance, checking in to see how my day was going, planning thoughtful dates, surprising me with small things that showed he paid attention. Like the time he brought me my favorite coffee without me ever telling him what I usually ordered, or when he noticed I was stressed from work and simply sat with me in silence, holding my hand until I felt calm again. I remember thinking, this is what it feels like to be loved right. But there was one thing I couldn't ignore. Even though at first I tried to brush it off, Daniel never tried to take things to the next level physically. At first, I found it sweet. In a world where so many relationships seemed to move too fast, his patience felt refreshing. When we kissed, he was tender but never pushed for more. When we cuddled on the couch, his hands never wandered. In the beginning, I convinced myself it was simply because he respected me, and honestly, it made me admire him even more. But as months went by, I started to notice patterns. There were moments when intimacy would have felt natural. Long nights together, romantic dinners, or those quiet moments where we were so close I could feel his heartbeat. Yet Daniel always pulled back, gently changing the subject or finding an excuse to shift the atmosphere. It wasn't rejection exactly, but it was noticeable. I tried not to overthink it. After all, wasn't this what I had always said I wanted? A man who valued emotional connection over physical? Still, late at night, lying awake while he held me at a careful distance, I couldn't help but wonder. Was it me? The first time I brought it up, we had been dating for nearly 6 months. We were sitting in his apartment, a soft movie playing in the background, when I finally gathered the courage. My voice was light, almost teasing, though my heart was pounding. "Daniel," I said, "don't take this the wrong way, but you've never really tried to sleep with me. Most guys would have at least, made a move by now." He didn't get defensive. He didn't laugh it off. Instead, he went very quiet, his jaw tightening just slightly before he answered. "I know," he said softly, "and I'm sorry if that makes you feel unwanted. That's not how I see you at all. You're important to me." His words were sincere, but they didn't explain much. I wanted to press further, but something in his eyes told me not to push too hard. So I let it go, at least for that night. Still, the question lingered in my mind like an itch I couldn't scratch. Why? Was he not attracted to me? Was there something he wasn't telling me? The more I thought about it, the more restless I became. And slowly, I started noticing other little details about Daniel. He never talked about past relationships. Not once. When I asked, he would simply say, "There's not much to tell," and change the subject. He didn't flirt with anyone else, didn't seem interested in anyone else, but he also carried this wall around certain parts of his life that I wasn't allowed to touch. It made me feel like I was holding on to only half of him. One night, after another date that ended with nothing more than a kiss on the cheek, I finally couldn't take it anymore. "Daniel," I said, my voice shaking just a little, "if you don't want me in that way, you need to tell me. Because right now, I feel like I'm missing something. Like you're hiding something from me." He looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a deep breath, he finally spoke. "There's something I should have told you earlier. I didn't because I didn't want to scare you away. But I think it's time you know the truth." And that was the night Daniel told me about his vow. Daniel sat there, his hands clasped tightly together as if he was holding on to something fragile. For a moment, he didn't look like the calm, collected man I thought I knew. He looked conflicted. Finally, he exhaled. "I've taken a vow," he said quietly. "A vow of celibacy." The words hit me like a wave I wasn't ready for. "A vow," I repeated, not sure if I had heard him right. "Yes," he said, his voice steady, even though his eyes showed hesitation. "Before I met you, before I even thought about being in a relationship, I made a personal commitment to God. I promised that I wouldn't be physically intimate before marriage. For me, it's not just about waiting, it's about honoring something I believe in deeply." I sat frozen, trying to process. Out of all the possibilities I had considered, him not being attracted to me, him hiding a secret relationship, him being unsure about us, this wasn't one I had prepared for. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was confusion. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" I asked. "Why keep it a secret for so long?" Daniel rubbed the back of his neck, looking guilty. "Because I didn't want to lose you," he admitted. "Most people don't understand. They hear the word celibacy and immediately think it means I'm not serious about the relationship or that I don't feel desire. But that's not true. I do want you, probably more than I should sometimes. But I've made a promise, and I can't break it. At least not until I'm married." His honesty should have made me feel better. Instead, it twisted inside me. I admired his faith, his discipline, the strength it must take to make such a vow. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the ache in my chest. I had spent months doubting myself, wondering if I wasn't enough for him. Now, I finally had the answer, but it didn't erase the insecurity that had already taken root. I looked at him, searching for words. "So, what does that mean for us? Do we just keep things the way they are, forever waiting?" Daniel reached for my hand, holding it tightly. "It means if you choose to stay with me, I'll give you everything I can, my love, my loyalty, my commitment. But physical intimacy, at least in the way most couples define it, will have to wait until marriage. I know that's asking a lot. I know it's not easy. And if you feel like that's something you can't handle, I'll understand. But I needed you to know the truth." His words hung heavy in the air. My mind was a storm of thoughts, questions about my own needs, my own limits, and whether love alone could carry us through something like this. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I tried to focus on work, on friends, on anything else, but Daniel's confession replayed in my mind over and over. Part of me respected him deeply. After all, how many men could resist temptation in the way he did? But another part of me felt robbed. I wanted passion. I wanted closeness. I wanted to feel desired in the way I had always imagined a relationship should feel. One evening, I met with my best friend to clear my head. Over coffee, I spilled everything. The vow, the way Daniel had hidden it from me, the confusion I felt now. Her reaction was immediate. "Girl, that's insane," she said, almost spitting out her drink. "You're telling me this man has been dating you for months, making you question yourself, when all along he knew exactly why he wouldn't touch you. That's not fair." I sighed. "It's not that simple. He's not a bad guy. He's probably the kindest man I've ever met. He just believes in something different. He's not doing it to punish me." She raised an eyebrow. "Maybe not. But you need to think about yourself too. Are you really okay with this? Because love is amazing, but intimacy is part of a relationship. If you ignore that part of you, it might come back to hurt you later." Her words stayed with me. I wanted to defend Daniel, but deep down, I knew she wasn't wrong. When I saw him again, I decided to be honest. "Daniel," I said, my voice trembling slightly, "I respect you. I admire your faith and your strength. But I need to know, do you see us getting married? Or am I just supposed to wait indefinitely, hoping one day you'll decide it's time?" He didn't hesitate. "I wouldn't be with you if I didn't see a future. I don't waste time with things I don't believe in. But I also can't rush. Marriage isn't something I'll do just because I want intimacy. It has to be right, it has to be real. That's why I need you to be patient with me." His words were reassuring, but they also placed a weight on my shoulders. Patience. Waiting. Hoping. As much as I loved him, a small voice inside me whispered, "What if you wait, and it doesn't end the way you think it will?" The days after Daniel's confession felt like walking through a fog. Outwardly, Everything between us looked the same. Dinners together, late-night talks, laughter over small jokes. But underneath, something had shifted. I couldn't look at him without thinking about the vow, without wondering what it meant for us in the long run. I told myself I could handle it. That love was more than physical. That what we shared emotionally was worth more than anything else. But the truth? Every time his hand brushed against mine, every time he hugged me, I felt the absence of something more. It was like standing outside in the cold, staring through a window at the warmth inside but never being allowed to step in. One night, we were watching a movie at his apartment. It was a romantic film, filled with lingering touches and passionate kisses. As the characters on screen melted into each other's arms, I felt my chest tighten. Without thinking, I turned to him and leaned in, hoping maybe this time he would kiss me differently, longer, deeper, with the kind of fire that made my heart ache. But Daniel gently pulled back, his forehead resting against mine. His eyes were soft, apologetic. "You know I can't," he whispered. The words were like a knife. I forced a smile, but inside I felt myself breaking a little more. Later that night, when I was home alone, I stared at the ceiling and asked myself the questions I had been avoiding. Could I really do this? Could I really wait indefinitely, hoping for a marriage that might not even come soon? Did I love him enough to suppress the part of me that longed for intimacy? I didn't want to admit it, but resentment was slowly taking root. Not because of his vow, I respected his faith, but because he had hidden it from me for so long. If he had told me in the beginning, maybe I would have made a clear choice. But now? Now my feelings were too deep, and walking away felt impossible. At work, my focus slipped. My colleagues noticed I was distracted, but I brushed off their questions with fake smiles. In reality, my mind was a constant battlefield, heart against logic, desire against patience. One afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Daniel. "I've been thinking about us a lot. I want you to know, even if things feel difficult right now, I'm committed to you. You're not alone in this." I stared at the screen, torn. His words were kind, loving even, but they didn't erase the loneliness building inside me. A week later, I met him for dinner. We sat in a quiet corner of a small Italian restaurant, the kind with candlelight flickering on the tables. The atmosphere was romantic, almost too much for me to bear. Halfway through the meal, I finally spoke. "Daniel, I need to be honest with you. I'm struggling. I respect your choices, but I feel unwanted sometimes. Like no matter how much you care about me, I'll never get all of you. It's like there's a wall between us, and I don't know how to live with it." He listened silently, his expression heavy. After a moment, he reached across the table and took my hand. "I hear you," he said softly, "and I don't want you to feel unwanted. I do want you more than I can put into words. But my promise, it means everything to me. It's not about rejecting you, it's about holding myself accountable to something greater. I know it's hard. I know I should have told you earlier. But I'm asking you to trust me, to trust that this is worth it." His sincerity was undeniable, but it didn't solve my problem. Trust was easy. Patience was not. That night, after I got home, I sat alone on my bed. My best friend's words echoed in my mind. "Are you really okay with this? Or are you just trying to convince yourself you are?" I buried my face in my hands. I wanted to believe love was enough. But I couldn't ignore the aching truth. Something was missing, and pretending otherwise would only hurt me more in the end. As weeks turned into months, the tension only grew. Our relationship was filled with love, laughter, companionship, but always with an invisible barrier neither of us could cross. And the more time passed, the louder the question inside me became. How long can I really live like this? The slow ache of frustration became part of my daily routine. I carried it like a shadow, following me everywhere I went. Some days it was quiet, almost bearable. Other days, it screamed inside me, reminding me of everything I was missing. Friends started to notice. When I went out for coffee with my best friend, she leaned across the table and studied my face. "You're not yourself," she said bluntly. "You look drained." I sighed, stirring my cup even though I had no intention of drinking it. "It's Daniel," I admitted. "I love him, but it feels like I'm in a relationship where part of me is locked away." Her expression softened, but her words cut sharp. "Love is amazing, but if you're constantly sacrificing the core of who you are, it'll eat you alive." I wanted to argue, but deep down I knew she was right. My needs, my desires, they weren't disappearing. They were only being buried, waiting to surface in moments of weakness. One evening, Daniel and I went on a long walk by the river. The air was crisp, the sky painted in shades of pink and orange as the sun dipped below the horizon. It should have been romantic, but my mind was restless. Daniel, I began carefully, have you thought about what this means long-term? About marriage, kids, everything? He stopped walking, turning to face me. His jaw tightened slightly. Of course I've thought about it. I see us together. I see us married. I see us raising a family. Why do you ask? I hesitated. Because I want to know if your faith will always come before me. If you'll keep drawing lines I can't cross. His eyes softened, but his answer didn't comfort me. My faith isn't a wall between us. It's the foundation of who I am. If you're with me, it's part of us too. I nodded slowly, though my chest felt heavy. His words were honest, even beautiful in a way. But they also reminded me of the gap between us, one I wasn't sure love alone could bridge. The weeks turned into patterns. We still laughed, we still supported each other, but intimacy became a ghost hovering in every room. Every hug ended too soon. Every kiss stopped before it could begin. I started to avoid certain moments because I knew they would end in disappointment. At night, lying awake, I wondered what our future would really look like. Would I spend years waiting, convincing myself it was worth it? Would I marry him only to face new rules? No contraceptives, endless restrictions, choices made not by us, but by his interpretation of faith? The fear sank deeper. What if I gave up years of my life for something that could never truly fulfill me? My family didn't know the details, but they sensed something was wrong. At a Sunday dinner, my mother pulled me aside. You seem distracted, she said gently. Is everything okay with Daniel? I forced a smile, lying through my teeth. We're fine. Just busy with school, you know. But inside, I wasn't fine. I was unraveling. The breaking point came one night when Daniel brought up the idea of attending a church retreat. It's a weekend trip, he explained excitedly. Lots of workshops, discussions, prayer. I think it'll be good for us. I froze. The word us hung heavy in the air. Daniel, I said slowly, you know I don't share your faith. I've supported you, I've gone to church with you, but this isn't me. I can't keep pretending. His face fell. I'm not asking you to pretend. I'm asking you to walk beside me. Frustration boiled up inside me. But what about me? What about walking beside me? Every compromise, so far, has been mine. I've supported, I've adapted, I've sacrificed. But where's the balance? For the first time, silence stretched between us like a canyon. His eyes searched mine, but he didn't answer. And in that silence, I realized something painful. We were standing on opposite sides of a line neither of us could erase. That night, as I lay awake, tears slipping down my cheeks, the question inside me grew louder than ever. Was I really willing to give up myself for him? Or was I just too afraid to let go? The silence between us didn't fade. It grew louder with each passing day. Daniel tried to fill it with small talk, with plans about the future, but underneath, I could feel the tension. Like a glass that looked intact on the outside but was already cracked deep within. One night, after another quiet dinner, I couldn't hold it anymore. Daniel, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Do you realize how much I've given up for you? He looked at me, startled. What do you mean? I set my fork down, my hands trembling. I've gone to church with you. I've listened to your debates. I've told myself I could wait 5 years, without intimacy. But when have you ever done the same for me? When have you been for us? He shook his head slowly, as if I was missing the point. Faith isn't about bending. It's about standing firm. And if you love me, you'll understand why I can't compromise. His words hit like a blade. My throat tightened. But what about me? I demanded, tears threatening to spill. What if standing firm for you means breaking me? He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. For the first time, his patience cracked. You're making this about you. Don't you see? This is bigger than us. This is about God. The room went cold. I stared at him, the man I loved, and suddenly saw him differently. Not as my partner, but as someone who would always belong more to something else, something I couldn't touch, couldn't compete with. That night, I cried until my chest ached. Every memory of us together replayed in my head, our laughter, our plans, the way he used to hold me close. But now those memories felt like a lie because the man in them was gone. Over the next week, I began to notice the cracks everywhere. When I reached for his hand, he pulled away too quickly. When I kissed him, he pressed his lips to mine, but his eyes were distant. When I tried to plan something fun, he suggested church events instead. It was like I was losing him piece by piece, and the harder I held on, the faster he slipped away. One night, I asked him the question I had been dreading. Daniel, if we got married, would you want kids right away? He smiled faintly. Of course. That's what marriage is for. A family. Children. My stomach twisted. And what if I don't want them immediately? What if I only want 2 years apart? What if I want to use contraceptives? His smile vanished. That's against the church. Marriage is about being open to life. Contraceptives are a sin. My heart sank like a stone. So, even in marriage, I wouldn't get a choice. His silence answered me more clearly than words ever could. I walked home that night with my chest hollow, the streetlights blurring through tears. For the first time, I asked myself, am I in love with the person he is now, or the memory of who he used to be? The thought terrified me, because deep down I knew the answer. The night after that conversation, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing in circles. Every word Daniel had said echoed in my head. Faith isn't about bending. Contraceptives are a sin. This is bigger than us. Each sentence felt like a wall between us, stacking higher and higher, shutting me out of the very future we had once dreamed about together. For days, I carried that weight silently. At work, I smiled through it. With friends, I pretended everything was fine. But inside, I was unraveling. One evening, I finally broke. Daniel and I were walking back from his church service. The night air was cool, but my chest was burning. I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, tears already stinging my eyes. Daniel, I can't do this anymore. He froze. What do you mean? I swallowed hard, my voice shaking. I can't keep pretending this doesn't hurt. I can't keep telling myself I'll be okay with waiting 5 years, with giving up control over my body, with always coming second to your God. He looked at me with something close to pity. You're overthinking this. Relationships require sacrifice. If you love me, this is your sacrifice. The words shattered me. I choked on a sob. Don't you see? That's the problem. Everything is my sacrifice. My beliefs. My body. My future. And what about you? What have you sacrificed for us? His jaw tightened. I've sacrificed plenty. I've given up the way I used to live. I've chosen a harder path because it's the right one. And you should respect that. I stared at him, and for the first time, I didn't recognize the boy I had fallen in love with. The boy who used to debate ideas with passion, who used to make me laugh until my stomach hurt, who once told me that we were his world. That boy was gone. Now all I saw was someone who would always choose his faith over me. That night, I cried harder than ever before. My chest ached. My hands shook. It felt like grief, like mourning a relationship that hadn't even officially ended yet but already felt dead. In those sleepless hours, one truth sank deep into me. If I stayed, I would keep breaking myself into smaller and smaller pieces until there was nothing left. And if he truly loved me, he wouldn't be asking me to do that. The morning after my breakdown, I woke up with swollen eyes and a hollow chest. But beneath the ache, something else had settled. A strange, quiet clarity. I looked in the mirror and whispered to myself, you can't keep begging for love. You deserve someone who meets you halfway. For weeks, I had been waiting for Daniel to change, to compromise, to see me. But now I realized he never would. His faith wasn't just part of him. It was his whole identity. And in that world, there was no room for my needs, my beliefs, my future. The thought was painful, but liberating. That day, I started pulling back. Not in obvious ways, but slowly, quietly. When he texted long Bible verses, I responded with short replies. When he asked to pray before meals, I bowed my head but kept my eyes open. When he talked about our future children, I stayed silent instead of nodding along. At first, he didn't notice. He thought I was just tired, distracted, stressed from work. But inside, I was creating distance brick by brick, wall by wall. One evening, I sat at my desk and opened an old notebook, the one where we had once sketched out wedding plans and baby names. I stared at the pages, then slowly tore them out one by one, feeding them into the trash. It felt like erasing a dream, but it also felt like taking back my power. For the first time in months, I asked myself, what do I want? What does my life look like without him? The answers were blurry, but they were mine. And that was enough. A small ember of strength sparked inside me. And from that ember, a new thought formed. If Daniel believed his faith was untouchable, maybe it was time he learned what it felt like to lose something sacred. That night, lying in bed, I whispered to myself, "This isn't the end. This is the beginning." Daniel still thought everything was normal. He kept talking about God's plan, quoting verses, dreaming aloud about our marriage. To him, I was still the loyal, patient girlfriend who would eventually bend to his faith. But inside, I had changed. I started paying attention to the cracks in his armor. Daniel liked to act as if his faith made him strong, untouchable. But in private moments, I saw the insecurity underneath. He feared judgment from his church. He obsessed over what people thought of him. He needed approval more than he needed love. That was where I decided to begin. One Sunday, instead of joining him at service, I stayed home. When he asked why, I told him gently, I needed time for myself. He smiled, but I saw his jaw tighten. His faith was supposed to unite us. Me skipping church planted the first seed of doubt. Later that week, I did something small but deliberate. When his friends from church visited, I asked innocent questions. Do you think relationships can survive without intimacy? Don't you think God also gave us bodies to love and connect? The room grew quiet. His friends shifted uncomfortably. Daniel laughed it off, but I could see the unease flicker in his eyes. I wasn't attacking him directly. I was letting his own world question him. At home, I began keeping a journal. Not about my pain, but about his contradictions. Every time he broke his own rules, every time he slipped, I wrote it down. Like the night he drank a little too much at dinner, even though he preached against alcohol. Or the time he stared too long at a woman passing by, before quickly quoting scripture to cover it. I was building something, evidence, power, leverage. Daniel didn't notice. He thought my silence meant submission. He thought I was finally surrendering to his way of life. But in truth, I was sharpening my knives. Quietly, patiently, and for the first time in a long time, I smiled. Because I knew the same faith he used to control me would be the weapon I used to destroy him. Daniel kept living in his illusion. He truly believed he was leading me closer to God, closer to him. He preached discipline, celibacy, and sacrifice every single day, as if repeating the words would make them true. But I had already learned the truth. Daniel wasn't strong because of his faith. He was fragile because of it. So, I started feeding his world with small fractures. Whenever we were around his church friends, I would casually mention his little slips. Not in an obvious way, but enough to make them raise an eyebrow. Oh, Daniel was so funny last night after his glass of wine. Or, Daniel gets nervous sometimes, especially when people talk about temptation. I said it with a smile, like I was teasing. But his friends didn't laugh. They remembered. They judged quietly. And Daniel felt it. At first, he brushed it off. He thought his charm would cover the cracks. But gossip spreads fast in places built on faith. The whispers began. And with each whisper, his perfect image weakened. In private, he started lashing out. Why would you say that in front of them? He snapped once, his eyes burning with anger. I just tilted my head and said softly, I was just being honest. Isn't honesty a Christian virtue? The silence that followed cut deeper than any scream. I didn't fight him. I didn't argue. I let his own beliefs trap him. Meanwhile, I kept writing, page after page of his double life. His contradictions. His failures. His hypocrisy. I knew that one day, those pages would matter. Daniel still thought he was the one in control. But little by little, I was pulling the ground out from under him. And soon, very soon, he would have nothing left to stand on. By the time I decided to act, my notebook was heavy. Not with rage, but with method, dates, times, little contradictions that all fit together like a mosaic. I hadn't wanted to be someone who weaponized pain, but there's a difference between revenge for the sake of malice and taking back what was mine. I told myself it was the latter. I wanted him and the people who'd enable him to see the whole picture, not the curated fragments he fed them. I didn't go loud. That wasn't my style, and it wasn't necessary. Daniel's world thrived on quiet certainties. The right clothes, the right phrases, the right people saying the right things. Once those certainties wavered, the whole thing trembled. First, I made copies of the things that couldn't be disputed, screenshots of messages where he'd implied things that contradicted his sermons, photos he'd taken with friends at a bar that he'd later called a leadership meeting, the receipt from an online gambling site I'd once stumbled on while he left his laptop open. I paired each item with a short note. Date, who else was there? why it mattered. The notebook wasn't gossip, it was a file. Then I picked my audience. Gossip could ruin someone mercilessly, so I went to the people who could actually do something. The pastor and two elders I'd seen Daniel always defer to. I'd watched him smile for them, hang on their approval. If they looked at him differently, it would ripple. I wrote a calm, factual email and attached a single PDF, no accusations beyond what the documents showed. I didn't add commentary. I let the evidence speak. My hands trembled when I hit send. A small, irrational part of me wanted to turn back, to apologize and take it all away. Another part, clear and steady, knew this was the first step in reclaiming myself. If he'd asked me to give up my body, my choices, my future, then I had to make him accountable to his own community, to the beliefs he'd used to fence me in. The pastor replied within a day. His words were measured, and they arranged a private meeting. When I sat in the small office, the pastor looked tired, the lines at the corners of his eyes deeper than I remembered. He flipped through the pages I left with him, brow furrowing. "These are serious," he said finally. "We don't take this lightly. Thank you for bringing it to us." Part of me expected a warm, grateful relief. Instead, I felt cold, like the moment before thunder breaks. The pastor asked me to be patient while they verified things. He asked me if I'd be willing to talk to the elders together. I said yes. Worse than my fear of being judged was the fear that nothing would change, that I would have turned my pain into noise and earned nothing. While the church did their quiet, delicate investigation, I continued the other work no one saw. I let small comments slip into conversations with his closest friends, those church youth leaders who thought of him as a model. I'd mention vague things like how hard it is to live up to what you preach, and watch the way they tilted their heads. People hearing doubt quietly makes doubt louder in your own head. And then, just when I thought I might be overreaching, something tangible happened. A woman from Daniel's small group, she'd always been warm to me in passing, texted me out of the blue. "Can we talk?" she wrote. Her message was short and a little hesitant. When I met her for coffee, she didn't look like a conspirator. She looked like someone who'd been given a thread and pulled at it until a whole sweater unraveled. "You're not the only one who's noticed," she said, stirring her latte. "He posts about purity, but he's also posted photos at places he'd later call ministry fundraising dinners." I thought maybe I was imagining it. "I'm glad you brought it forward." Her admission felt like validation and a mirror. It wasn't just my perception. There were others who'd noticed the mismatch. The pastor's investigation wasn't just for me. It was for a handful of people who had started to feel the unease, too. The first confrontation was quiet and clinical. The pastor asked Daniel to come in. I wasn't in the room. I didn't want that intimacy. Instead, I sat in my car in the church parking lot, hands wrapped around a paper cup of cold coffee, listening to muffled voices through the rolled-up windows. I watched Daniel walk out 10 minutes later, his face pale, mouth moving, hands steadying as if he was trying to hold himself together. He glanced my way once, just once, and I felt something in him change, a deflation, as if the balloon of his performed righteousness had been punctured. Word traveled, not with the shrillness of a scandal but like an ink stain, spreading into linens, quietly visible if you looked close enough. People who'd once nodded along at his comments now hesitated. A few of his friends stopped making their weekly calls. The eldest among them, an older man Daniel worshipped, asked to speak with him privately. I watched from a distance as the older man's voice grew firm, then soft, then firm again. Daniel's shoulders drooped. For the first time, he looked like someone being judged by the crowd that mattered most to him. But the true fracture came a week later, on a Wednesday night service. The sanctuary smelled of old wood and lemon cleaner. When the pastor stood and addressed the congregation, he didn't mention names. He talked about integrity, about the danger of saying one thing and doing another, about how the church must be a place where truth matters more than reputation. You could feel the air shift. People glanced around, searching faces. After service, a few members who had stood near Daniel's circle drifted away, as if the gravity that had held them to his orbit loosened. Someone whispered my name. I heard it twice, soft and unsure. Daniel found me in the hallway with an expression I'd never seen, equal parts rage and pleading. "Why did you do that?" he snapped, as if the pastor's words had been my doing rather than the documents he'd put before them. "I gave them the truth," I said.
My voice was steady.
"Not because I wanted to hurt you, but because the truth matters. You asked me to believe in something you wouldn't share with me. You asked me to make sacrifices you wouldn't. If your faith is public, then let it be public in its whole, flaws and all." He looked at me like I'd betrayed him. You could have handled this privately. You could have. I did handle it privately, I said. I talked to the pastor first. I asked for their discretion. It was your choices that made this public. His mouth opened, then closed. For a second, he seemed to grasp what that meant. The safe places he used as cover had been exposed. The trust he'd relied on, both from me and from his circle, crumbled into something like smoke. I didn't feel triumphant in the way I'd imagined. What I felt was hollow relief, and beneath it, a bittersweet sorrow. He didn't fall off a cliff, he slipped. His friends weren't yelling. They were looking at him with disappointment, asking hard questions. The image he'd cultivated, the anchor of his self-worth, was cracked, and the pieces were starting to scatter. That night, I lay awake, not celebrating, but listening. For the first time since all of this began, I slept without that knot in my chest. The silence wasn't sweet exactly, but it was mine. I'd wanted him to see what his choices did, not to exact vengeance for vengeance's sake, but to stop the slow erasure of myself. I had started a process. It was inevitable that it would have consequences. Some I wanted, some I didn't. The church would decide how to proceed. Daniel would have to answer, not to me alone, but to a community whose respect he had traded for performative holiness. In the morning the text started, questions, accusations, and a few messages that sounded almost like apologies. My phone buzzed until I silenced it. For the first time, I let it vibrate without flinching. I had done what I needed to do. What followed would unfold without me pulling the strings. And somewhere beneath the hectic churn of other people's opinions, a small, steady part of me simply breathed. Daniel's downfall wasn't instant, but it was relentless. Like a slow fire eating away at dry wood, his shiny new image of holiness began to blacken, char, and collapse. At first, there were only murmurs, whispers after Sunday service, side glances at the Bible study meetings. But soon, the questions became louder, sharper, harder to ignore. One of the church elders, a stern older man with a piercing gaze, pulled Daniel aside one afternoon. "Son, is it true?" His voice carried disappointment, not anger. "Is it true that while you preached purity, you secretly indulged in what you condemned?" Daniel stammered, his usual confidence cracking. I don't know what you've heard. People twist things." But the elder didn't budge. "We've seen the screenshots, the conversations, the proof." Word spread quickly. His peers, the same people who had once cheered his testimonies, began avoiding him. His so-called brothers in faith distanced themselves. The very community he built his new identity on was now erasing him. I watched it all unfold quietly, my heart pounding every time a new message reached me. Friends from his church would text, "You were right about him." Others would call him a hypocrite in group chats I knew he'd see. For weeks, his social media became a battleground, angry comments, disappointed reactions, even mocking jokes. Daniel tried to fight back, posting long defenses, quoting scripture and claiming persecution. But the evidence was too clear, too damning. He couldn't twist it away. The final blow came when his pastor, the man he admired most, spoke openly at the congregation. Without naming him, he talked about wolves in sheep's clothing, about hypocrisy, about betrayal of trust, about those who sought leadership before they'd mastered integrity. Everyone knew who he meant. Daniel sat in the pew that day, pale and shaking. He didn't raise his head once. Later, he tried to reach me. Texts, calls, long, rambling voice messages filled with apologies, half-confessions, and desperate pleas. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I was confused. I thought I could balance it all. Please just talk to me. I need you." But I never answered. My silence was the sharpest knife. Because revenge wasn't about screaming or throwing his sins in his face. It was about letting him drown in the weight of his own choices, letting him watch everything he built collapse around him. And as I watched him unravel, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe. The heaviness that had been pressing on my chest for months finally lifted. Every night that I'd cried myself to sleep, every morning I woke up with doubt, every argument that ended with me feeling small, it was all behind me now. Daniel had destroyed himself. I didn't have to scream. I didn't have to beg. I didn't even have to expose him myself. His own hypocrisy, his own lies, had dragged him down. That was the beauty of it. I just stepped back and let him burn. He lost friends. He lost respect. Even his family, who once praised his newfound faith, looked at him differently. His future as a lawyer, The thing he dreamed of and worked toward now had a stain he couldn't erase. His name carried whispers, the guy who preached celibacy while sneaking around. His reputation was shattered. Meanwhile, I rebuilt myself. I focused on school, on my goals, on the friends who had stood by me when everything felt impossible. I laughed more. I slept better. I looked in the mirror and saw a girl who had walked through fire and came out stronger, sharper, unbreakable. Sometimes I'd see his name pop up online, desperate posts about being misunderstood, about redemption, about how God was testing him. But no one was listening anymore. The audience he once craved had abandoned him, and all that was left was the silence of his own failure. And me? I was free. Free from his control. Free from his endless demands. Free from a future where my needs, my wants, my dreams would always come second to a faith I didn't share. Revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, precise, and final. The sweetest revenge wasn't ruining his life with my own hands. It was watching him ruin it himself, and walking away with my head held high. Because in the end, the truth always comes out. Hypocrisy always cracks. And the people who put themselves on pedestals will always fall the hardest. I didn't just survive him. I won.